What happened when an undercover CEO discovered one of his grocery clerks living in her car with a baby? Welcome, thoughtful listeners. People who appreciate compassion, resilience, and the power of doing what's right when no one's watching. This story isn't just about corporate secrets or surprise promotions. It's about quiet strength, unwavering values, and how one life can spark a ripple effect of change. If you believe that integrity still matters and that everyday people are capable of extraordinary impact, you're in the right place. Get comfortable. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Elliot Ramsey hadn't bagged groceries in over 30 years, not since he started Bright Spring Grocers with a rented booth, a stack of produce, and a handwritten sign that said fresh, fair, and friendly. Now the founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar grocery chain, Elliot was more familiar with quarterly reports and boardroom strategy than barcode scanners and breakroom coffee. But every year he shed his title, traded his suit for denim and flannel, and went undercover as an entry-level associate at one of his stores. He called it his Back to the Roots Week, a chance to experience the daily grind his employees faced and reconnect with the values Bright Spring was built on. This year he chose Store 212 on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, a busy, often overlooked location with high turnover and low morale, according to recent HR reports. Introducing himself as Eli, a new inventory associate, he stepped through the sliding doors with a clipboard, an ID badge with a fake name, and a genuine curiosity about what had gone wrong, or right, on the ground floor of his own company. At 58, Elliot was no longer the wiry young man who hauled crates at dawn, but his sharp eyes still noticed the little things. Who smiled when they didn't have to, who held the door open for a customer, who sighed when management wasn't looking. These undercover weeks had taught him more than any executive summit ever could. They had shown him where systems broke, where trust frayed, and where heroes quietly clocked in and out, unseen. This time, however, he sensed something different. The staff seemed tired, not just physically, but emotionally. And on that crisp October morning, before his first shift even began, a small noise in the parking lot would pull him into the life of an employee whose story would shake the very foundation of Bright Spring's mission. He didn't know it yet, but his annual ritual was about to become something much more than a check-in. It would be a reckoning. It was just after 5:00 a.m. when Elliot pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Store 212, the morning fog curling low across the pavement like mist on a forgotten battlefield. He parked in the back, near the employee entrance, hoping to quietly observe the early shift rhythm without drawing attention. As he stepped out of his car, a soft, unfamiliar sound caught his ear. A baby's cry, faint but unmistakable, carried through the cold air like a siren. He paused, scanning the lot. Near the far edge, partially shielded behind a row of recycling bins, sat a dented silver sedan with foggy windows and a sunshade awkwardly pinned across the back seat. The infant's cries grew louder as he approached, though instinct warned him not to get too close. Then, the driver's side door creaked open, and a young woman stepped out, cradling a baby in one arm while tugging a diaper bag over her shoulder. She was careful, practiced. Without fuss or panic, she quickly changed the baby's diaper on the passenger seat using a small mat, warmed a bottle with a portable car heater, and gently rocked the infant into calmness. Elliot watched from a distance, unsure whether to intervene, retreat, or simply observe, but something about the woman's quiet competence held him in place. She wasn't just a random person sheltering on company property. He recognized her. Vanessa Green. He'd seen her name while reviewing employee profiles during pre-assignment prep. A cashier, single mother, less than a year on the job, no write-ups, perfect attendance. Watching her transform the cramped, cluttered car into a functioning nursery was as humbling as it was heartbreaking. When she finally emerged, the baby now nestled in a carrier, she looked every bit the composed professional. Her uniform, though slightly wrinkled, was clean. She wore no trace of complaint on her face as she briskly walked across the lot toward the side entrance, the same one staff with children used to access the in-store daycare. Elliot stood in place, stunned by what he had just witnessed. This wasn't a crisis moment, this was routine, and if one of his most promising employees was resorting to living in her car, Then somewhere between the mission statements and market shares, BrightSpring had lost something vital. Something Elliot intended to find again, starting with Vanessa Green. Over the next few days, Elliot, still going by Eli, settled into his undercover role, stocking shelves, breaking down boxes, and helping with early morning inventory runs. But his attention never strayed far from Vanessa Green. She was always the first to arrive, usually with a sleepy baby in tow, and always the last to leave. Despite the fatigue she must have carried, her energy on the sales floor never faltered. She greeted customers with genuine warmth, knew the regulars by name, and diffused tense situations with a grace that couldn't be taught. Her fellow employees naturally gravitated toward her. New hires asked her for help even before the shift lead. And when the store's temperamental checkout system glitched, again, it was Vanessa who stepped in to guide others through the manual process. During breaks, she sat alone, not scrolling on her phone or chatting idly, but reading company training manuals and scribbling notes in a well-worn notebook. Elliot once saw her quietly explain the product coding system to a high school bagger, her tone patient, encouraging. No one had asked her to do it, she just did. Elliot also noticed she never mentioned her living situation. Not once. There were no complaints, no signals of distress, only a focused professionalism that made her shine without seeking attention. Most impressive was her attitude. While some coworkers grumbled about their schedules or customers, Vanessa remained upbeat, even joyful, often offering encouragement with a quick smile or kind word. To the average manager, she was just another competent worker. But to Elliot, she was an unsung cornerstone of the store, a walking embodiment of everything BrightSpring claimed to value. And yet, she was invisible to those higher up. As he watched her balance scanning groceries, offering recipes to customers, and helping restock shelves, all while carrying the unspoken weight of a mother living out of a car, Elliot's admiration deepened. This wasn't just resilience, this was leadership in disguise, and as he logged her efforts in his secret notebook, he began to wonder, how many more like her existed within his company? Quiet stars, whose brilliance had been dimmed by the sheer noise of survival. It was time to bring their stories to light, starting with hers. Elliot Ramsey had seen enough to know Vanessa Green was special, but he needed to be sure her loyalty wasn't just born of desperation. Was she truly committed to BrightSpring's values, or was she staying only because she had no better option? To find out, he orchestrated a test, one that would measure not her skills, but her principles. With precision and secrecy, he enlisted Harper Liu, his sharp and composed chief of staff, to pose as a senior recruiter from a fictional competitor, Pure Harvest Market, a fast-growing organic chain with a reputation for poaching rising talent. Harper had played roles in corporate theater before, but this one was different. It had to feel real, sound persuasive, and present an irresistible offer. She was briefed on Vanessa's record, mannerisms, and strengths. Then, during Vanessa's lunch break, just as she returned from feeding baby Noah in the daycare, Harper made her move. Clad in a sleek navy suit and carrying a leather-bound portfolio, Harper approached Vanessa near the break room with a poised smile and an invitation for a quick chat. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, Vanessa followed her into a small conference room at the back of the store. There, Harper laid it out, calm, professional, persuasive. Pure Harvest had been watching Vanessa's metrics and customer feedback, her calm under pressure, her conflict resolution skills, her leadership potential, and they wanted her. The offer was everything Vanessa could have dreamed of. A $72,000 0-cent salary, full medical coverage for her and Noah, 3 months' rent paid up front in a clean, safe apartment complex, a fresh start wrapped in a bow. But then came the catch. The position would require her to resign from BrightSpring immediately and start the next morning. Harper leaned in, lowering her voice to imply urgency and confidentiality. "We're preparing to launch a new customer experience platform," she said. "Your insight from BrightSpring's internal systems could be incredibly valuable." The words hung in the air, heavy with subtext. Vanessa's heart pounded. The money could change everything. No more sleeping in the car, no more hiding. But the request, it didn't feel right. The secrecy, the rush, the subtle nudge to share proprietary knowledge, it all reminded her too much of Emma's father, a man who had once promised safety but delivered manipulation. Vanessa sat back, eyes narrowing, torn between survival and self-respect. She didn't know she was being watched from behind a one-way mirror, and Elliot held his breath, waiting to see what choice she would make. Vanessa sat frozen, her eyes locked on the contract in front of her. The salary figure alone made her breath catch. It was more than double what she made now, enough to get a proper apartment, cover Noah's medical needs, and start living instead of surviving. Her hands trembled as she traced the housing clause, imagining Noah sleeping in a real crib, not the backseat of a car. Harper's voice remained calm but persistent, urging her to act fast. "This opportunity won't last," she warned. "If you want to secure the role, we need your resignation by the end of the day." Vanessa nodded numbly, but inside, something began to stir. The more she thought about it, the more the offer felt too perfect, like bait. She thought of the kind daycare manager who always saved a warm bottle for Noah, of her supervisor who never questioned her requests for extra shifts, of Ely, the quiet new guy who saved her a fresh cup of coffee every morning and asked her opinion on shelf layout like it mattered. She thought of the values printed on the company's break room wall: community, integrity, growth, and wondered if anyone still believed them. She knew she did. With a steadying breath, Vanessa gently pushed the folder back toward Harper. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I can't accept it, not like this." Harper blinked, her practiced smile faltering for the first time. "You're sure?" "Brightspring took a chance on me when no one else would," Vanessa replied. "Even if I'm just a cashier to them, they've given me more than most ever have. I won't betray that trust." She stood, smoothing her modest uniform, the baby food stains a quiet badge of survival. "And besides," she added with a small smile, "my break ended 5 minutes ago." With that, she walked out, not knowing she'd just passed the most important test of her life. Behind the mirrored glass, Elliot let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. She had chosen character over comfort, loyalty over leverage, and in doing so, she had just changed the trajectory of her future in a way she could never have imagined. Vanessa's heart pounded as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor of Bright Springs corporate headquarters, the highest she'd ever been, both in the building and in her career. The meeting request had come from HR with no explanation, only urgency. Her first thought was dread. Had someone discovered she was living in the store's parking lot? Was she being let go? Had she somehow violated policy by rejecting the recruiter? Her palms were sweaty, and she clutched her worn notebook like armor. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to reveal glass walls, polished marble floors, and a panoramic view of downtown Portland. An entirely different world from the sticky registers and flickering lights of store 212. But nothing startled her more than the person waiting just beyond the doors. Harper Liu, the recruiter from the day before, now wore a Bright Spring executive badge. She gave Vanessa a warm smile, not the rehearsed one, but something softer, real. Before Vanessa could ask a question, Harper motioned her into a sleek conference room. At the head of the table sat a man in a crisp gray suit, one leg casually crossed over the other. He stood as she entered, and her breath caught. "Really?" she whispered. But no, this wasn't Eli, the inventory associate. This was Elliot Ramsey, the CEO, whose photo hung in every store, whose name appeared on every policy manual. "It's Elliot, actually," he said gently, stepping forward. "But I've grown quite fond of Eli, thanks to you." Vanessa stood frozen, eyes wide as the realization sank in. The test, the offer, the recruiter, it had all been staged. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot's expression turned serious. "Because I needed to know if we still walk the talk at Bright Spring, if our values mean anything when no one's watching, and you, Vanessa, showed me that they do." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, she found a formal offer. Director of Frontline Innovation, executive salary, full benefits, company housing, stock options, a seat at the table. Her hands shook as she read the words, her eyes blurring with tears. "This isn't charity," Elliot said, his voice firm but kind. "This is recognition. You've lived our values better than most of us ever have." Vanessa looked up, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say," Elliot smiled. "Then start with yes. We have a board meeting in an hour, and I'd like you to tell them exactly how to make this company better, for people like you. By evening, Vanessa stood in the doorway of her new corporate apartment, a bright, modern two-bedroom unit in the Bright Spring Towers complex across from headquarters. It felt surreal. Just last night, she had rocked Noah to sleep in the back seat of her car, listening to the wind rattle against the windows and wondering how much longer they could endure. Now, sunlight spilled across polished hardwood floors, and soft nursery colors peeked from behind an open door where a professionally designed room awaited her son, complete with a crib, bookshelves, and a mobile of stars and moons that mirrored the ones they used to count through the windshield. The movers, arranged by Elliot, had already brought over her few belongings: 2 suitcases of clothes, a bag of baby items, and a small shoebox filled with memories from her old life. But what overwhelmed her more than the space was the care. The apartment wasn't just furnished, it was thoughtful. Clothes in her size hung in the closet, ready for her new executive position. A fridge was stocked. A handwritten welcome note waited on the kitchen counter. For everything you've already given, and everything you're about to change. Elliot. Vanessa's promotion wasn't symbolic. It came with real responsibilities. On her new company phone were onboarding documents, organizational charts, and a welcome packet from Harper Liu, now revealed to be her official executive mentor. Her new title, Director of Frontline Innovation, put her in charge of bridging the gap between store-level employees and upper management, ensuring stories like hers would never go unnoticed again. That night, after Noah was asleep in his new crib, Vanessa sat by the window, the city lights twinkling below. She could see the parking lot of Store 212 in the distance, barely a few blocks away. The memory of where she'd come from wasn't far. It never would be. But now, for the first time in years, she exhaled without fear. No alarms. No midnight bottle warmings in the front seat. No more hiding. What she had now wasn't just safety, it was opportunity, and she intended to use it to lift others the way someone had finally lifted her. 5 years later, Vanessa Green stood confidently at the front of Bright Spring's annual leadership summit, now held in the company's newly expanded headquarters. Her sleek suit, commanding voice, and calm composure bore no trace of the exhausted young mother who once blended formula bottles behind a recycling bin. As Vice President of Frontline Strategy and Employee Empowerment, she was no longer an exception to the system, she was helping redesign it. Behind her, a massive screen displayed data from the Fresh Start Initiative, a company-wide program she had founded to support employees in crisis. The numbers were staggering. Over 450 employees transitioned from homelessness, domestic violence, financial collapse, or single parenthood into stable careers. Retention among participants was 92%, and 70% had been promoted within 18 months. But it wasn't the statistics that moved the crowd, it was the stories. Vanessa spoke of a former warehouse associate who was now managing a regional distribution center, and a janitor who became a certified safety trainer through a Bright Spring scholarship. She talked about a single father, once sleeping in a shelter with his twins, now leading store operations for the entire Pacific Northwest. And while she never spotlighted her own journey, those in the audience knew she had lived it. That authenticity made her words resonate deeper than any executive keynote could. Her presence alone was a reminder that integrity and compassion weren't just ideals to aspire to, they were tools for transformation. As she concluded, the room stood in applause, not the polite kind reserved for speakers, but the heartfelt kind saved for someone who'd truly made a difference. Watching from the front row, Elliot Ramsey smiled proudly. His decision to go undercover 5 years ago hadn't just changed Vanessa's life, it had changed the entire company. After the summit, Vanessa mingled with employees, many of whom had gone through the Fresh Start Initiative themselves. They didn't just thank her, they told her she made them feel seen, understood, believed in. Vanessa always listened, always remembered their names. She made a point to mentor them personally, just as Harper Liu and Elliot once did for her. As she looked around the room, now filled with empowered, inspired people from every level of the company, she understood something with perfect clarity. True leadership wasn't about rising above others, it was about reaching back and pulling others up with you, and that was exactly what she intended to keep doing. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender as Vanessa stood before the newly constructed building across from Bright Spring's main campus. Its sleek modern facade, glowing in the soft evening light. Above the doors, etched in brushed steel, were the words, "The Green Center for Employee Renewal." Elliot Ramsey stood beside her, now nearing retirement, his smile one of quiet pride. "You started something that changed us," he said simply. The center was Vanessa's brainchild, 5 years in the making, a culmination of every hardship she had endured and every barrier she had helped others overcome. Inside, it housed emergency housing units, a 24-hour child care facility, counseling services, a career coaching wing, and a mentorship hub. But what made it revolutionary was its soul, a pay-it-forward model, where those who had once been helped would in turn mentor the next person in need. As they stepped inside for the opening ceremony, Vanessa spotted a young woman huddled near the intake desk, 2 children clinging to her sides, a suitcase at her feet, and fear in her eyes. Without hesitation, Vanessa walked over, crouched to the children's level, and offered the same smile that once made her feel seen on the worst day of her life. "You're safe here," she said gently. "We're going to help you get back on your feet." The woman nodded, overwhelmed with emotion, and Vanessa guided them toward the intake office, just as someone had once quietly guided her. Later that night, in her penthouse apartment, Vanessa tucked Noah, now a lively 6-year-old, into bed. "Tell me the car story again, Mama," he whispered, snuggling into his pillows. Vanessa smiled, brushing his hair back. "Once upon a time," she began, "a mama and her baby lived in a car. They had hope, but not much else. Until one day someone saw them, not just as people struggling, but as people worth investing in." Noah beamed. He knew the story by heart, but it never got old. As Vanessa stood once more at her window, gazing at the green center glowing softly in the night, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the evening supervisor. "New family just arrived. Could use a friendly face." Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat. She may have traded her name tag for a title, but her purpose hadn't changed. She would always be the person who showed up, who remembered, who believed. Because now she understood the real measure of success wasn't what you achieved for yourself, it was what you gave others the chance to become.